From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. visited quake-stricken communities in Davao Oriental Province on Monday and delivered over 298 million pesos in aid to support local recovery efforts in the Davao and Caraga regions affected by the two powerful earthquakes on October 10th. According to Palace Press Officer Claire Castro, the assistance includes 50 million for the provincial government of Davao Oriental and 108.3 million distributed across various local government units, including 15 million pesos each for Manay, Banay-Banay, and Lupon, 10 million pesos each for Mati City, Tarragona, Baganga, Boston, and Catil, 5 million pesos each for Caraga and San Isidro, 3 million for Governor Generoso. In a news release, the Presidential Communications Office, or PCO, said the Office of the President will also provide the following financial assistance: 20 million pesos to Agusan del Sur Province, 15 million pesos each to the provinces of Davao de Oro, Davao del Norte, and Davao Occidental, Agusan del Norte, Surigao del Norte, Surigao del Sur, and Dinagat Islands, and Davao City. President Marcos said other affected LGUs will also be provided with assistance. The President also said the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, will release Local Government Support Fund, or LGSF, to the provinces affected by the earthquakes. The Chief Executive said the Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH, will tap their Quick Response Fund, or QRF, to support the repair of damaged buildings. During his visit, President Marcos inspected damaged structures at the Manay National High School in San Ignacio Town and the Davao Oriental Provincial Hospital. President Marcos Jr. also visited evacuation centers in Central Town and Tarragona Municipal Grounds, where he met affected residents. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, distributed 10,000 pesos cash assistance to 35 families and 255 family food packs. Meanwhile, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, or DSUD, committed support through its Integrated Disaster Shelter Assistance Program, including 20 million pesos in financial aid, 150 modular housing units, and 50 million pesos worth of construction materials. DSUD Secretary Jose Ramon Aliling reported to the President it is deploying the modular shelter units in Davao Oriental for the quake victims. Aliling, who is in Cebu to brief the President of quake efforts, said this is part of the planned Bayanihan Village, a temporary housing project designed to give quake victims a safe and dignified refuge while permanent solutions are developed. The deployment of modular shelters in Davao Oriental mirrors similar efforts in Cebu Province, where it established a Bayanihan village in San Remigio, one of the hardest hit areas by the magnitude 6.9 earthquake last September 30th. More sites are being prepared in Daanbantayan and Medellin, also in Cebu, to accommodate displaced residents. In a meeting with local chief executives, or LCEs, the President assured continued support from the national government. The assistance follows the magnitude 7.4 and 6.8 earthquakes that struck Manay, Davao Oriental on Friday, affecting parts of Davao region and neighboring provinces, triggering landslides, power outages, and widespread structural damage. The two earthquakes displaced thousands of residents and forced several municipalities to declare a state of calamity. Last Friday, the Department of Health, or DOH, mobilized its emergency medical teams and deployed more medical personnel and resources to Manay, Davao Oriental as the earthquake damaged the Davao Oriental Provincial Hospital. Also deployed is a drinking water treatment plant mobile unit to provide clean and safe drinking water. The department provided medical supplies, public health commodities, and wash or water, sanitation, and hygiene materials, along with nutrition support items for evacuees. Health Secretary Ted Herbosa said medical tents were set up and healthcare workers dispatched to ensure continuous patient care after the hospital sustained significant structural damage.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Monday vowed that the government will stay on the ground in earthquake-hit communities for as long as necessary, not just for emergency relief, but until every displaced family is fully back on their feet. President Marcos visited areas affected by the 7.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Davao Oriental Province on October 10th. The chief executive brought some 298 million pesos in financial aid to affected local government units. During a situation briefing, the president urged residents not to hesitate in requesting for additional support, stressing that agencies like the Department of Social Welfare and Development, Department of Health, Department of Public Works and Highways, and Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development will maintain their presence on site.
Kausap mismo natin ang pamunuan ng DOH at ang sabi po nila, ang ganitong panahon talaga ay nandito po talaga lumalabas ang influenza-like illnesses. At
pagka may sakuna kagaya nito, ay lagi kong sinasabi na huwag kayong magdadalawang isip kung anong pangangailangan ninyo, sabihin ninyo sa amin. Kung kaya namin dalhin, kaya namin ibigay, gagawin namin. At hindi ito pangminsanan lamang. Hindi kami aalis dito, hindi aalis ang DSWD, ang DOH, ang DPWH, lahat na yang DSUD, ang at CDO, lahat wala sa aming aalis dito hanggat lahat ng the citizens na natamaan ay nakabalik na sa more or less na normal na buhay. Hindi na nangangailangan ng relief goods, hindi na nangangailangan ng shelter, hindi na nangangailangan ng gamot, hindi na at least na emergency yun ang ating gagawin. So that's our job. So we have to do this together with the local government. Yan ang lagi kong kasi ang local government talaga ang pinaka authoritative. Kayo alam ninyo kung saan yung problema, alam din ninyo kung ano yung dapat maging solusyon eh. So nakikinig kami sa inyo. At I hope that for now, at least people are already meron silang masilungan, meron na silang kinakain. That's okay na yun for now. Pero tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung pagdala ng suporta.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Monday, Malacañang assured that the government remains financially equipped to sustain disaster response efforts despite successive calamities. In a Palace Press briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has confirmed that even if allocations under the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management, or NDRRM, or NDRRM and Quick Response Fund or QRF are fully exhausted, the government can immediately tap 12.005 billion pesos from the contingent fund.
Kung magkakaroon man at madideplete po ang NDRRM funds, meron pa rin po tayong 12.005 billion sa contingent fund. At kung mauubos man po ang contingent fund dahil sunod-sunod po ang nangyayaring calamity sa ating bansa, maaasahan po natin kung may excess revenue, makakuha po tayo sa unprogrammed appropriations mula sa SAGIP.
The assurance comes as the country reels from back-to-back natural disasters in recent weeks. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake jolted Cebu and neighboring provinces in the Visayas on September 30th, triggering landslides, infrastructure damage, and displacing several families. October 10th, magnitude 7.4 and 6.8 earthquakes struck Davao region, destroying homes, schools, and key road networks. Meanwhile, consecutive typhoons lashed Luzon and parts of the Visayas, bringing floods to Metro Manila, Bicol, and northern Luzon, prompting preemptive evacuations and widespread relief operations. These events have placed heavy pressure on the QRF allocations of agencies such as the Department of Social Welfare and Development and the Department of Public Works and Highways, which both fund immediate relief and rehabilitation efforts.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meantime, Department of Science and Technology or DOST Secretary Renato Solidum Jr. on Monday assured the public that recent tremors felt in different parts of the country are normal because of active faults and trenches. In a television interview, Solidum said the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology or PHIVOLCS records at least 30 quakes daily. Solidum said the recent earthquakes in Cebu, Davao, Zambales, and La Union are not connected, as each was generated by different and distant fault systems. He underscored the importance of following the National Building Code, as buildings and houses should not collapse even with intensity 8 shaking. The DOST chief said there is no need to run outside if the public is sure about the building's structural integrity. This would avert injuries and deaths while evacuating a building during an earthquake and prevent people from being hit by falling objects or debris. Solidum also urged the public to prepare an emergency bag or go bag and know where to evacuate and how to seek assistance from the local government.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news Monday, Malacañang said the suspension of face-to-face classes in Metro Manila is a precautionary move by the Department of Health or DOH to prevent the spread of influenza-like illnesses commonly seen during the colder months. In a Palace Press briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the DOH has clarified that current flu cases remain 8% lower compared to the same period last year, but authorities opted for a health break to stop infections from further spreading in schools.
Kausap mismo natin ang pamunuan ng DOH at ang sabi po nila, ang ganitong panahon talaga ay nandito po talaga lumalabas ang influenza-like illnesses. At sinabi nga po nila, katulad ng panahon ng nakaraan, mas mababa nga po ngayon ng 8%. Pero aasahan pa rin po natin na dahil sa panahon na taglamig at ito ay maaasahan. Pero minabuti po nila na wag na po itong kumalat at nagkaroon po ng health break sa mga eskwelahan at para po hindi na nga po ito humawa or magkahawahan ang mga estudyante. At ito ay magiging paraan na rin para linisin ang mga eskwelahan sa 2 araw para pagpasok ng mga bata ay maaasahan na ito ay safe at malinis na po.
Castro said the 2-day suspension would also allow schools to disinfect facilities to ensure that classrooms are safe and clean once students return.
Dateline Malacañang.
Still on Monday, Malacañang expressed support for lifting restrictions on public access to statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth or SALANs, signaling readiness from the executive branch, including President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., to comply with any new transparency measures. New Ombudsman Jesus Crispin Remulla earlier announced plans to issue a memorandum that would reverse prohibitions on SALAN access imposed during the Duterte administration. In September of 2020, the Office of the Ombudsman issued Memorandum Circular No. 1, which severely restricted access to SALANs by requiring the consent of the official involved or a court order, effectively blocking media and civil society from independently reviewing wealth disclosures. In a Palace Press briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the executive is prepared to align with reforms that promote accountability.
Kung ano po ang nararapat at kung ano ang sinasabi ng batas at kung ano ang makakabuti para malabanan ang korupsyon, tatalima naman po ang lahat na nasa Executive Department.
But is the President ready po to release his SALN kung may magre-request?
Lahat po na nasa Executive Department, handa po.
Under Republic Act or RA 6713 or the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees, all government officials and employees are required to file their SALANs annually. The document is meant to serve as a tool against illicit enrichment by tracking changes in officials' declared wealth. Transparency advocates have long pushed for the reopening of public access to SALANs, arguing that full disclosure is essential in deterring corruption and rebuilding public trust.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has directed the full implementation of a 10-year roadmap aimed at strengthening the country's creative sector and protecting Filipino artists and cultural workers. Under Memorandum Circular No. 103, signed by Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin on October 7th and made public Monday, the government adopted the Philippine Creative Industries Development Plan, or PCIDP 2025 to 2034, which outlines strategies to support industries such as music, film, design, crafts, advertising, digital media, and cultural heritage. The Philippine Creative Industries Development Council has been tasked to lead the execution of the plan and review it every 3 years, in accordance with Republic Act or RA number 11904 or the Philippine Creative Industries Development Act. To ensure wide-scale implementation, Malacañang directed all government departments, agencies, state universities and colleges, government-owned and controlled corporations, and financial institutions to align their programs with the PCIDP. Initial funding for the plan will be sourced from existing appropriations of relevant agencies, while continued implementation will be proposed in future national budgets. The Philippine creative economy contributes an estimated 7% of the country's gross domestic product or GDP and employs millions across both formal and informal sectors. The PCIDP aims to increase global market presence for Filipino content, protect intellectual property, ensure fair compensation for creative workers, and develop world-class talent and infrastructure.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has appointed 2 new members to the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board, or MTRCB, replacing outgoing officials ahead of the board's next term cycle. In a letter to MTRCB Chairperson Diorelia Soto Antonio, President Marcos named Pedro Cesar Gabriel Atienza Solidum as member, replacing Zeni Mancilia and Minoa Refaso Santo Domingo in place of Maria Marta Ines Dairit. Both will serve until September 30, 2026. President Marcos directed the appointees to immediately assume their posts and furnish copies of their oaths to the Office of the President and the Civil Service Commission. No additional details on the new members' backgrounds and appointment were provided. MTRCB was established through Presidential Decree number 1986, signed on October 5, 1985 by then-President Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr. It is mandated to regulate and classify motion pictures, television programs, and publicity materials, among others.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service is live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.